Hi everyone, and welcome once again to Ruby's Classic Cooking. And today I'm making Bannock. Now that's a traditional recipe that goes way back historically. It's basically a very large biscuit. Instead of making a whole lot of little biscuits, you just make one big round one and serve it warm. With butter and jam is perfect. But back in the good old days, there were a number of different ways of preparing this. Scottish people came over from Scotland and brought this recipe, and they used rye flour and oatmeal to make it. Nowadays, it's made with good old all-purpose white flour. Indigenous people used to make this recipe, and the French made this recipe. It was a great recipe for making over an open fire, because you can do one of two things when you're making this. You can either pat this into a nice flat cake and bake it on a cookie sheet in an oven, 450 degree Fahrenheit, or I think that's 220 Celsius, I'll have to look that up, oven for 20 minutes. Or you can put it in a frying pan and cook it over a burner on your stove for 15 minutes on a side. Or you can do the same thing and cook it over a bed of coals in your campfire. So this was a great recipe for when you were roughing it in the woods, for the voyageurs, for all kinds of historical applications. So let's dive right into this recipe. It's very quick, simple, and easy with few ingredients. This particular version of Bannock comes from my Food à la Canadienne cookbook, which is filled with traditional Canadian recipes. Still in print. Anyway, this recipe starts off with 2 cups of all-purpose flour. That's in Canada. Now that would be strong flour or bread flour in the United States or in the UK. Next ingredient up is 3 teaspoons of baking powder, and that would be 15 milliliters of baking powder. And that's baking powder, not baking soda. 2 different ingredients, don't interchange them. 1, 2, 3. Followed by 1 teaspoon of salt. I've used iodized table salt all of my life, but you may use uniodized salt, sea salt, pink Himalayan rock salt, whatever kind of salt you bake with. This has worked for me 50 years of baking, and I've used table salt. Now you kind of mix these together, sift or blend these together. And into this, with my pastry blender, which is a very useful thing to have if you have one in your cupboard. If you don't, you can always use 2 knives to do this. You want to add your shortening to this, and you want to combine it until it looks like breadcrumbs. It has the consistency of breadcrumbs. So right here I have 1/4 cup of shortening. It was frozen, so I kind of broke it up into pieces so it would get up to room temperature faster. You know, it's one of those scientific things, create greater surface area, and it will help it to come up to room temperature faster. A lot faster than one big lump. Of course, if you store it at room temperature, that's even better because then you don't have to try and get it up to room temperature before you can use it. So here's my pastry cutter, and I'm just going to use it to combine until I have my fine breadcrumbs. Just keep doing this until you have fine breadcrumbs. Right now, you can't really overbeat this and make your biscuits tough. But once you've added the water to it, you have to be careful because it will toughen up, and you don't want tough biscuits. Believe me. You want nice tender biscuits, you don't want tough biscuits. Oh, back in the good old days when I was a Girl Guide, way back when we would go on hikes in the together, when we would go on hikes in the afternoon sometimes, our leaders would bring something that was made that was biscuit dough, and they would roll it out into nice long thin strips. And then when we got where we were having our lunch, they would make a fire. We would lay and light a fire. We would gather some fresh alder twigs from the side of the road or wherever, which back in those days you were okay you're okay with doing that. Alders grow up like weeds anyway, so it doesn't really hurt to cut them back. They're kind of a nuisance shrub that people frequently clear away anyway. And we would take those and we would make them into toasting sticks. And then we would take these long thin strips of biscuit dough and wind it around the end of it. And then you would put that in the fire. You would hold that in the fire to toast it. And once they were toasted, and you need a really hot bed of coals really to do that in properly, then you take that and you put jam, you took it off the stick and then you put jam inside of it and wrapped it around it and you ate it with jam. And well, quite honestly, it usually made a terrible sticky mess all over your hands, as if you weren't lucky you got some jam blobbed on your clothing. It wasn't entirely a successful snack to be having on a hike, but what did our leaders know? And if your fire wasn't hot enough or you had flames and not a nice hot bed of coals, well, the biscuit dough didn't cook properly, so you were trying to eat jam on this partly cooked, partly raw. Anyway, it wasn't always the yummiest dessert you ever had in your life. But we were kids, we didn't know any better. Done properly, it would have been really delicious, but unfortunately, people just got the recipe. Our leaders got the recipe for that, but they didn't actually have a lot of experience on how to make it turn out. So unfortunately for us, our experiences with making these things are not very positive, shall we say. Of course, nowadays you'd never be irresponsible enough to cut down alder sticks by the side of the road, nor would you be laying and lighting a fire in the woods, somewhere in the woods, which could start a forest fire or something. You'd probably take a stove with you instead. Ah, the good old days. All right, now I'm going to see how those look like nice breadcrumbs. This now has the consistency of breadcrumbs. Okay, I'm now going to add 3/4 of a cup of water to my mixture here, and I'm going to use as few strokes of my fork as possible. After I add the water, use as few strokes as possible to mix in the flour, because you don't want to make your biscuits tough. This is the point at which you can make your biscuits tough. You don't want to form those gluten strands like you would with bread, because this is a baking powder recipe. So, this is a biscuit. In goes my water. And now I'm just going to stir that up gently, but quickly. It's probably going to make a fairly soft dough. See how this is going. Use my fork here. Okay, now I've got just about all of my flour mixed in here very, very quickly. Now I'm going to add a little flour to my board here. It's a little sprinkling here. I'm going to turn out my biscuit dough, my bannock. I'm going to knead this for about 30 seconds, very lightly. And while I'm kneading it, I'm going to be shaping it into kind of a round, flat disc. And when I have a round flat disc, I can either put this into a lightly greased frying pan. Once you get a consistent texture, and use a little bit more flour to get rid of some of that stickiness. Not much, just a little bit. There. Now there's my my bannock. It's going to make one 10-inch bannock. And you put this on either a lightly greased cookie sheet and bake it in a preheated 450 degree oven for 20 minutes. Or you put this on a frying pan on the stove top, and a greased frying pan, or you put it on a greased frying pan on top of your stove for 15 minutes, flip it over and cook the other side. But today I'm just going to use take the coward's way out here. I'm just going to go the easy way here, and I'm going to cook it in the oven. And when it's done, I'll come back and show you what it looks like, all golden brown and delicious. So here's my disc. Flatten it a little bit. There we go. 10-inch disc. A And I actually have a pizza pan here that is stoneware that I'm going to use to bake this in the oven. Because this is just like a cookie sheet, it's just it's round, and I wanted to put it on something round. Yes, it says to pat it into a 10-inch round. Okay, so that's about a 10-inch round. And now into my preheated 450-degree oven for 20 minutes, and I'll be back to show you my final baked. And here we are about 20 minutes later, and here is my bannock, all fresh and hot from the oven. And it is, look at that golden brown deliciousness on the bottom and on the top. And here it is, all beautiful and golden brown, and it says to eat it warm. This bannock is just like one great big biscuit. And I'll cut this up into wedges like a pie, and I'll serve it with some butter and jam, which should be delicious. Because biscuits go great with jam or cheese, if you prefer. Well, I hope you enjoyed my video today, and I hope that you will like, subscribe, give this recipe a try, tell your friends about my channel, and come on back and watch some of my other over 130 videos, and come and join me next time on Ruby's Classic Cooking. Bye for now.